Let's chat. Good evening. Welcome to the Feeder Alignment Committee meeting. I'm Ron Lesko, the Director of Communications and Operations, and just wanted to get us started very briefly. Superintendent Adams is finishing up a previous meeting and will be joining us shortly. So to move things forward, I'm going to turn it over to Board President Ann Savage.
And I'm going to do the part that the superintendent was going to do, so I'm probably not nearly as well, but I wanted to thank you all again for your service, especially those of you who have not been elected to the Board of Education. We really appreciate your making this part of your routine to participate in this and all the work you've done for many months leading up to where we are now. Tonight we are hoping, we'll see what happens, but we are hoping that we can leave here with a small number of scenarios that this committee can stand behind as recommendations for the Board of Education to consider. That's what we're hoping. And so the model that we're going to use tonight is to review a little bit of like how we got this on the data side. I'm not going to spend any of your time reviewing the history. I know you all lived it. You don't need a review of that. But just a refresher on how the model works and what's in there, and as well as a couple of highlights of what's new. And then I have sent you guys all a spreadsheet, which is, it will be kind of like a personality test or Rorschach test because there's scenario information in there, but there's no scenario names. So you'll be able to play around if you've got Excel at home, however you want, and look at the scenarios and see what seems right to you. Before we actually look at the names. And we are thinking, and we meaning the superintendent and Dr. Robin and I met a little bit earlier, that it would be an interesting exercise to try and winnow this list of 60, which is what you have, down to maybe 10 or 15 before you see any names. And then we can look at the names of the 10 or 15. And we're not asking you to make these decisions blind, because this is information. It's much too complex and nuanced to try and make these decisions without all of the information. But so we thought it would be a good practice to get rid, to winnow down to a smallish number, and then look at individual scenarios and see if we can get down to that sort of 3, 4, 5, something like that, that we might present to the board on Thursday. And so I am going to share. I think I can share. Yes, I can. I did a little presentation here for you guys, just because that would help me remember what I was doing. Why is it not presenting? Because that would be too easy. Are you seeing the presented version? Okay, that's no.
Yes,
I see it.
Oh, wait, there we go. Now it's in the presentation version. Thank you. All right, so you guys know this part. The middle schools, our goal is to end up with 3 middle schools roughly the same size. We want middle schools that have students that have roughly the same amount of needs, right? That the resources needed for each middle school is roughly the same. And that we have, as a district, really committed to this feeder concept, feeding elementary schools to middle schools, as opposed to doing something radically different. And so where we are right now is that we are working with a model that tries to predict enrollment and student resources needs for every single possible combination, so that we can make sure that we have not missed any of the possibilities. And then from the likely candidates, we would use our own skills and knowledge to an understanding to identify some best options. You guys know that there's 2 main components to that. There's enrollment and then there's need, right? It's Albany, so enrollment is complicated, right? Our enrollment is always up, it's down, it's here, it's there. We never know what's happening with enrollment. It's so complicated. And we did build in, after our meeting last time, as many of the factors as we've talked about as we possibly could. We have handled returning, and when I say returning, that means 5th graders who are going to become 6th graders. That's what returning means in these slides. Returning self-contained students. They don't feed through their neighborhood schools. They are going to feed through the good work of Dr. Wilson Turner and her colleague, Ms. McKenna, as they figure out the best way to place our special education students evenly among the middle schools, 6 classrooms, self-contained classrooms in each middle school. I know they're always very tuned into and sensitive to trying to keep the self-contained students with their neighborhood school whenever possible, because there are great relationships between the self-contained and non-self-contained students. So I know they try and do that as much as they possibly can as part of their work. Second bullet, we have a surprisingly large number of new entrants at 6th grade. I think that this is one of those times where people really need to open their minds to what the data shows, which is not necessarily what we all would have assumed. We don't lose students at from 5th to 6th grade. We gain students. We do lose some, but we also gain a bunch, and much more than I think any of us really had anticipated. Over the last 3 years, that's been an average of 84 students a year. Right, that's a lot. We only have roughly 600 students per grade, so 84 is a large number. Those students who come in new can go one of 3 directions. They sometimes are self-contained students of their own, right? They come into us as a self-contained student and then they feed with the other self-contained students. Many times in this environment, they are refugee students who are newly moved to the US, and so they choose at parent option to go to the wonderful Albany International Center, where they can choose a 2-year sheltered program. And then there are some also who come in just as regular general education 6th grade students. And those students are fed via their home address. So their home address predicts, that's what our policy is. Wherever you live, whatever neighborhood school you would go to, you go to the middle school that neighborhood school feeds to. We also were able to factor in the retention. As we talked about last time, retention is really, really tricky for us to calculate. Retention meaning the number of 5th graders who become 6th graders, because of the changes we've made recently where our 4 schools that used to go to 6th grade now only go to 5th grade. And they've done that recently, and then we've had 2 years of COVID. So we really don't have great school by school retention data. So instead we used a district-wide retention figure of 81.8. which Dr. Robin determined literally by looking at student IDs and then looking for those same kids next year. Like, this isn't a guess. These are like the actual kids. Were they there the next year? 81.8 in the general ed environment, meaning not self-contained environment, and 84.8 in the self-contained environment. So our self-contained students do retain at a slightly higher level, which I don't think is a big surprise to anyone. The new thing that we have never talked about in this context before, at least in the way we've done it, mathy way we've done it now, is dual language. We all know that dual language is doubling in size, that right now it is a 2-deep school, but only for pre-K and K, and they'll be adding a year at a time for the next several years, which means in a few years, we will start seeing an impact of a double dual, right? Like if we stayed the way we are, Hackett would suddenly, about 5 years from now, would suddenly have twice as many dual kids as they have now, right? So we, as the feeder committee, have a little bit of a challenge because we need to plan a feeder pattern that will work right now, from now until 2027. And we also need to plan a feeder pattern that will work from 2027 on. And that is exactly the way I did the math, which is I ran the enrollment calculations both ways and tried to find scenarios that aren't wildly out of balance either way. The other thing that's a little different is that I used this current dual students for balancing in terms of the student need. Because the students that we have right now, we know a little bit about them. We can really have a hard time predicting what a 5th grader is going to look like in 3 or 4 years at dual, because with the new location and the change to the way the lottery program and the kindergarten, a lot of things have been changing in dual. So we just use what we have right now and the number of dual students we have right now for doing the balancing. You guys have this spreadsheet. You don't need to read these itty bitty bitty words on this thing. This is in the sheet I emailed you. This is just the summary of how everything plays out. And this yellow arrow that's right here, just pointing to the double dual, right? You can see that 32, right? I used this top line for most things, and I used the bottom line only for calculating the alternative enrollment. This is also new, just because I think it's important for us not to lose sight of the big picture. We have been for some time subtracting these TCCE kids off the top, I like to say. Like we're assuming that there'll be 15 less kids in each school because we know we send 15 kids to TCCE when TCCE is up and running, but we were never showing them going anywhere. So now I added that line here at the bottom. So there's the TCCE kids. And I've also got the AIC students showing there. This would be middle school AIC. So this would be the entire middle school enrollment. 1741 is what the model calculated it as. That compares to our current enrollment of 1836. So it's slightly less, which, hello, Superintendent. Nice to see you again, third time today, maybe something. But so that is, for comparison, it's a little bit lower, which seems kind of right-ish. We know that our enrollment is declining a little bit right now, K-12 at least. This is also a review for folks, and I just put it in here so that if there were questions, we'd have it. These are the metrics we used for doing the student need decisions: academics, NWEA, and New York State test scores, attendance, both the overall attendance percentage and this number of students, which I know is very important for our operational staff when they're thinking about how to distribute resources. Discipline also, total referrals, since every referral creates some work for staff, and total number of students that's like unique students with referrals. And then this thing we call the district created risk score, which we have both in the model, the average risk score per school and the number of students who are in, and I will point it out to you on the data. I consolidated, and Dr. Wilson Turner and Ms. McKenna, this is almost the opposite of what we said we were going to do, and I apologize, but I consolidated the higher and highest numbers because when we looked at the school by schools, and I can show you guys that when we get to the spreadsheet, there was a lot, it was very erratic. Like Arbor Hill had only one student in the highest risk category, and maybe that's accurate, but it just seemed like we might be missing something by separating those two. I can also do it for you a different way for your own use if it's helpful. And several times people have asked what's in the risk score. I forgot my trailing parentheses here, but besides that, I think this is accurate. It's got attendance, discipline, failing classes, credits for secondary students, NWEA for elementary, IEP status, ENL status, economic disadvantage, retention, not the kind of retention I was talking about a minute ago with students, but like grade retention, like being held back, and suspensions. And then there were a couple of other factors, not all of which I understand. I just got the list. But so you can see it's very comprehensive. And so the staff uses this to make sure that kids don't slip through the cracks, right? I think it's a really wonderful tool to identify kids that need a little TLC. And so we've used that. It was designed to be used operationally, and we are trying to use it for balancing. But as Dr. Rodman has pointed out several times, it's not something that's been peer reviewed. It's not something that's been used for this purpose ever before. So, we have to be cognizant that it's not a, deeply vetted approach. For returning students, we took these factors and
you cut out.
She's frozen.
I can't advance the screen, but with returning students, these were the factors that were combined weighting. We looked at attendance, the academics, discipline, and the risk score, and that created that single composite score for each school. And then based on that number, you can look and see what that composite score is for each school in terms of a lower number or a higher number, and how that relates to, and you're leaving again. I'm not looking, I'm going to pull up, there you are, you're back.
that was so weird. I could hear you guys, I could see you, but it was like I was a ghost. Nobody could hear or see me. That was kind of crazy. Okay, let's see.
I just picked up with where we were with composite score.
Okay.
And I was getting ready to transition to what a lower score meant and a higher score. So you can pick up right there.
Got it. Got it. So the key
You
thing.
just have to share your screen again, Anne.
Oh, thank you.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
The key thing I want everybody to focus on is that for all of these, what we care about is the narrowness of the range between the schools, right? It's not about high or low, it's about narrow or wide, right? Right now, we know there's a very wide, disparate analysis of our 2-3 middle schools, and we're trying to make that narrower, that range narrower. So we will do that for all of these things individually so that you can see that. We did that also for new entrants, and that was a little bit of a tricky thing. How do you project the behavior of new entrants? You guys were talking about that last time. So what we did, Dr. Robin looked at 6th grade new entrants versus 6th grade returning students. That means they were 5th grade the prior year, 6th grade this year, and compared their performance on similar metrics, right? State tests, attendance, and then we took a fraction, right? The returners generally do 97% as well as the new entrants do 97% as well as the returners on attendance. And so we then use that fraction to adjust the 5th grade attendance to say, okay, well then we're going to assume that a returner or a new entrant is going to perform at 97% on each metric. And you'll see that in the spreadsheet if you want to dig through the math. Okay, so then this is where I'm going to actually yield to Dr. Robin to talk about this a little bit if he doesn't mind, but I think it's really important that we all get the conceptualization of this piece of it.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just for those of you who are familiar with the idea of a confidence interval, it's the same idea with the model. So like if a child scores 585 on the state test, that's their observed score, but there's this hypothetical construct of an actual score. So the state will say, okay, the kid scored 585. We're 95% certain the child's actual score is between 580 and 590. So it's this range that's established by kind of best guess data. So for these scenarios, it's the same concept. Like scenario 1, we can't, we rank them according to whatever metric we settle on, we can't say scenario 1 is necessarily better than scenario 3 with a whole lot of certainty, but we're pretty sure it's better than scenario 100 or scenario 50. So when we do narrow down to like a top 10, in my mind, you shouldn't make a big deal out of which one is 3, which one is 5, which one is 7. Once you're top 10 out of an initial 500,000, you've passed the bar. Like you're in that top category. And there's other considerations that I think should probably trump where, the ranking in terms of top 10. So think of all these scores as kind of establishing the midpoint of a range, if that makes sense.
All right, so I really think it's hard for me as a person who's very mathy and analytical to keep that in mind and not want to line things up exactly, right? That's my tendency, but trying to keep myself open to the fact that this is that there's the confidence interval for each of these numbers and they overlap is really important. Okay, we talked about this last time. I just want to make sure it's fresh in people's head, the difference between a set and a scenario. There are 5.5 million different scenarios, 531,000 scenarios, right? But really, there are 6 within each, there are 6 scenarios that group together into a set. And this, what I've shown here, just because I think it helps it be more understandable if it's tangible, this is the set to which the current feeder pattern belongs. So if you look at this, this should look very familiar, right? Myers is Montessori, Pine Hills, Giffen and Ash. Hackett is New Scotland, Eagle Point, Toast, DCS and Dual, and North Albany is Arbor Hill Elementary, Spa and SA, right? That's the way it is right now. We could take any of those groups and move them around to different schools, right? We could take the Myers group and move it to Hackett and take the Hackett group and move it to North Albany. That would not change the equity, right? In terms of the metrics we've talked about to date up to this point. All of those other things that we've talked about already, attendance and discipline and test scores, are going to stay exactly the same no matter where the group is. And so the way it works out, you end up with 6 scenarios that are exactly the same, except that the groups are in different schools. Okay, so that's why everything always multiplies by 6, because there really is that's what's really happening behind the scenes. All the metrics already discussed will always be identical for each member of a set. That's just the way the math works. We have so far determined 3 factors, and Talea also mentioned a possible 4th that will be different as we move from a group from one school to another. How many schools change, right? That was one of the things you guys talked about from the very beginning. It is truly the only thing we know with any certainty, right? We actually know this. It is an actual fact that a school will change. Everything else has got, some kind of assumptions built into it. Something new that I built in because I wanted to make sure we weren't missing this compelling factor is how many students are getting to change where they thought they were going to middle school, right? Because some of our schools are very big and some are very small. And so it's not necessarily the same that the number of students is proportional to the number of schools. So I added that column. You've got that in your spreadsheet. And of course, this is one we've talked about, quite a lot, is how the change will impact transportation for students, how far they are from school, whether they have access to busing, how far their walk is. And I know that we talked a lot about the, that long walk zone and how that impacts us. Okay, so here comes the really new stuff. Everything else we've done has been reviewed with a little bit of like twisties on it. I did the thing that we've been wanting to do. I took the 531,000 scenarios and I looked for the enrollment range using a single dual's current enrollment, less the retention, blah, 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 and looked for situations where the range, that's the largest school minus the smallest school, that's the range, was under 35. Okay, and 35 seemed like a relatively okay number because every number could be wrong, right? So 35, well, if we're wrong in one direction, it might really be 50, right? So then we might end up with one school at 600 and one school at 550, right? We could probably live with that. We could be wrong in the other direction and they could be quite a bit closer than that. That's possible too. Then so when I did that, there were 2,442 scenarios that still survived. Then I took the dual doubled enrollment, right? That extra 16 over there in the end, and I did the same exact math, just with dual having more kids. And I looked for scenarios that were under 35 range in both, right? So that it would work now, and it would, unless something radical changes, still work in 2027 when we get our kindergartners there. That brought us down to 318 scenarios. See this 318, it's blue. See that 318, it's blue. That's not a coincidence. These are the 318 scenarios. They're broken down by the composite score. That's that composite we've been talking about where we took all the metrics and did math on them and merged them into one big number, right? This composite of 0 would be, if there was such a thing, would be like the best possible, right? And 6.5 is the broadest range, right? Because this is, again, the range of composites, right? If everybody had the exact same score, they'd be perfectly 0. The bigger the number, the broader the range. So you can see there are 318 of them. Look at all of our divisible by 6 numbers because we're measuring scenarios here. And I took the top 60 scenarios, which is 10 sets, right? That's what I pulled out, and that's what we're going to look at tonight. We excluded 99% just based on enrollment. Like we just went, yeah, these are not really going to work practically. We were left with 318. And from that, we took 60, which is about 19%. Okay, so we took the top 20% up here, and we left behind all this 80%. So back to Dr. Robbins' point, we're at the top now. We shouldn't be worrying too much within that top. I mean, it's still interesting and it's nice to look at, but it's not like it shouldn't be determinative. Also important, I think, for us to understand, this blue line represents the current feeder pattern, which is 4.34, right? That gave me some reassurance about the model. One of the things I've been doing as I've been going through and asking people millions of questions is I run the model, and if the current feeder pattern doesn't look non-equitable, I have to ask if there's a problem with the model, right? But this does look pretty non-equitable, right? It's well down the list, and we're staying way up here. So we have these 60 scenarios, 10 sets that are way better than the current feeder alignment. So I am now going to switch to those. So I'm going to switch to the Excel, and I'm going to walk you guys through this Excel. In particular, I want to remember to talk about the fact that some of us had expressed some concern or questions about the way the model was constructed, because we used like a numerical representation where 1 was the school with the, let's call it the best score, New York State scores, and 12 was the lowest, and there was some concern with that like artificially influence things. So on this spreadsheet, what I have done is given you all the actual ranges. So what I've got here, just to orient you, here are your 60, there's 60 rows. Okay. This is the current feeder pattern across the top so that you don't lose it, because I find it really helpful for context, so that if you're going down here, you go, oh yeah, okay, the current feeder pattern has an enrollment range of 200, right? We're way better than that in every single possible scenario. And this is the composite. This is the one that the mathy thing that we did to conflate all of the different metrics. And I'm just, it is sorted, but I'm just going to sort it again just to be sure, right? And I want you to see how well it lines up with these other things. So for example, NWEA range, when I take the minimum of all of these, right? All these NWEAs, and I get the smallest one, is 2.87, and the largest one is 5.99. So of all the scenarios we're looking at, the worst one for NWEA is 5.99, and our current feeder pattern is 12.41, right? So whatever the model, this mathy thing did, it seems to have done a good job of giving us a decent range of NWEA scores. And that's true also for NICED scores. Those are state test scores. Every single one is better. And the NWEA was really better. Like the worst one is half as good or twice as good as the current feeder pattern. It was a little softer for the test scores, but still substantial. Every single one was more than 2 points or 1.5 points better. Same for attendance, same for average risk. That's that district constructed risk. Same with students with any, and I'm skipping this one on purpose, I'm going to go back to it, students with any discipline, that's the unique students. I want to draw your attention to these words here. These are actual student counts, right? I'm going to expand this one. In this is students with any discipline. The model would project, this doesn't mean these are actual North Albany counts, right? This is the model's projection of what North Albany would be 22, Myers 19, and Hackett 18. And if you're like me, you're looking at it, goes, wow, those seem kind of close. Why are they so close? I thought North Albany was really inequitable. These are actual student counts. North Albany has 2/3 as many students in it as Hackett and Myers, but they've got almost the same number of discipline issues, or students with discipline issues, right? So those numbers are, you can't compare these numbers to these numbers because they're so disparate. You can do it as a percentage, which is what I did in order to color these things green. I did it as a percentage off to the side, and I can show you that math if you want to see it. But so it is also true that once you look at it a percentage for the student body, for discipline, for attendance, for economic disadvantaged students, all the scenarios are well better than the current one. The only place that wasn't true is for the total disciplinary counts, which is like if a student has 2 referrals, that's 2. If the student has 10 referrals, that's 10, right? So I don't know why it didn't work exactly right there. There must be some reason that has to do with the way discipline works that I don't know, but it wasn't terrible, it just wasn't perfect. The same thing was true for the student risk data. And I'm just going to bring you down to these risk quintiles. Oh, that's not even right. I did this before, don't worry. That's not going to change anything. That was just I changed that because I was messing around to see if it would make an impact. These are the actual fifth grade quintiles. Look at Dual. Dual looks like it's got the highest number of highest risk students as a percent. It's only 9 kids, but they've got 45%. Giffen, SPA, where I think we all know that there is a lot of kids at very high risk, are much lower than Dual. That's the problem with these very small n's, right? Dual only had 9 kids in it. So I don't know, like kids had a bad day. I don't know, things change. So I think that's why this risk data is to be used with caution. I wouldn't base the entire analysis on that. Okay. So then the only other thing I haven't talked about on the spreadsheet are these 6 columns here, which are the data. Oh, Dorian, go ahead.
Pause.
quick question about the discipline numbers. So the maximums look higher than the current. What am I not understanding? Because I thought you said everything is better. Oh, you're muted.
Are you in this column here?
Like BN, for example, or any of them. Yeah, BJ is fine. So
BJ,
the maximum
right.
says 14, the current one is 7. Again, maybe, I'm sure I'm just not understanding something.
This one is not a good one because they're not all better. Let's do it over here where they are all better, all right? If I look at these scenarios.
Yeah, so in the early, so basically the discipline ones are examples of where they're not all better. Is that right? But the academics are all better. Am I understanding that right?
No, these ones, if it's not all better, it's orange. These orange ones are the ones that they're not all better.
So how about BN, where the maximum is 9, but the current is 4?
Yep, that's the issue with the fact that this is based on student count, right? And North Albany has half, it's 2/3 as many students as the other schools. So you can't compare apples to apples between this and here. You can do it as a percent, which is what I did over here. I don't know if this will help you or if it's going to get too crazy. If you calculate instead of raw student numbers, which is what these are,
yeah,
a percent of the student body, okay, then it will make more sense, right? Does that help?
Yeah, and that's fine. I don't need to. That's good enough for me. Thank you.
Okay, but that's the issue. These, because they're raw student scores and because the enrollments are so wacky, you know, with this giant range, it just doesn't make sense. Okay, the last set of columns. Let me close these guys up so we don't have to look at them and get confused. These 6 columns are the transportation data, like we talked about. They was provided by the transportation department. Dr. Robin did some magic and suppressed from there the self-contained students. This is only non-self-contained students transportation data because self-contained students obviously have special transportation needs. And we did do both. This is all students based on their actual home address. How many of them would end up if their elementary school went to whichever one it's supposed to go to in this scenario? 167 students would end up walking less than a mile. 272 would end up in what we like to call the long walk zone, 1 to 1.5. And 137 would be eligible for busing. Okay, over 5. This is the same concept, but only for economically disadvantaged students. In case if there was a discrepancy there. So much of our student body is economically disadvantaged that it tends to mimic anyway. But if we wanted to emphasize our commitment to serving our students who have less economic advantage, these columns are only looking at students who are flagged as economically not advantaged, not economically disadvantaged in the data. Okay, so I think I've talked about all the columns. Does anybody have questions about how the spreadsheet works, what any of this means? Or are you just sort of like, okay, now what do we do next?
Yeah, and just to be clear, that first number, the 2s, they're basically saying that the 2, and then you got some code. So
those are an old ranking that I did. I'm going to ignore them. Delete.
Okay.
That was my question about.
Yeah, that was just a mistake. I forgot I had that in there when I sent it to you. You guys can all delete them too.
So I think this is really great, and I mean I really like the decision-making process of basically just tightening each criteria as much as you can so that you're good on all of them. In playing around with the filters, it seems like you can reduce it, pretty quickly, and it's just really, I guess to me, my question is like, how many of the board is the board really looking for? Like, I think you could get it to 4 just by tightening, like, the composite score, and like, don't make the walkers worse, and don't make there be 8 or more changes, and you're down to like 4. but I think, you know, if you want 10, I think you could do it, but what do you want? Because otherwise it seems like you'll get a good amount of, you know, scenarios really quick. This is great.
What I thought, and I'm open to whatever the committee thinks as well, I am trying to tune into the part of this that is relational and has to do with people and humans, and the fact that not everything can be measured by a number. So I think what would make sense is if we use what you just described, Dan, some of this quantitative metrics to reduce this somewhat, right? We've got 60 here. 60 is a lot. None of us have computers in our brains. We can't really process 60. But if we could get this down to 10, 12, 15, then we could look at the actual school names and see if there are other factors that the model is not incorporating, and use our own knowledge of our community to winnow that 10 or 12 down to maybe 3, 4, or 5 for the board. I'm hesitant to do that just on the numbers alone, even though, Dan, you know me, I'm a programmer. I like to just run the numbers and see what comes out. I just feel like there's so much to this decision. It's such an impactful decision that to ask people to make these decisions completely blind seems like we could miss something really important, because people are.
No, I mean, but if you go to like number of school changes, if you do 6 or fewer, it gives you 10 choices.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else, I mean, is just really about the math and the data, which I think it's great. I mean, you know, and it's all really close, and it's all in the top percentiles of what's possible. So, I mean, it's really hard to decide on the data. So, you know, when you do 6 or fewer, you get 10. If you add, you know, it means you don't have to mess with the number of students. I did 250 as a change or less, but that does the same thing. And then if you change composite score, I just took out the bottom ones over 2 because you use 2 above.
Mm-hmm. So what does anybody have other thoughts? Because I know that you guys from the very beginning have been very tuned into sensitivity to change, right? That's a factor for people. I will say one thing that I've thought about as I've been reflecting on some of these scenarios is there could be a situation which a little more change might be good too, right? I think it's good, Dan, that you said 6 rather than like, oh, let's just take the top 4, right? Because understanding the emotional reactions of people about who's moving where, I think is going to be a really important part of this. And so I think it's 6 seems like a better number than just like going, oh, like we're only taking the ones that are 4 or less.
Which click 7 on.
I couldn't hear that. What was that?
If you click 7 on, like if you make it 7 or more, and then you just make it so the walking piece, like the 1.5, I just made it 250 or less because that's the number of walkers. Like I just didn't want to make it worse.
Yep. Did you do? Oh, so you did it for all walkers? Okay. So that gave me. I thought I got 13. Did you get 13?
Yeah, and then I mean, but this is, you know, like then what? I messed with the composite range and I made it 2 or less.
I think they're mostly 2 or less already anyway, aren't they? Unless I sent you the wrong.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. And then in this one, you had to do the one with just the students too. I made that 250.
And now I got 9.
Yeah, but I mean, it's that kind of thing where if you just tighten it like one little bit, where it's like, well, I'd want 6, but you know, heck, go to 7. When you go, oh, well, I'd love everyone to not walk, but you go, well, I just don't want it worse. And that's a good amount of choices, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to reset this. We can pull it back at some point. I'm going to reset this back to 0 because I think the ones that people are really, I think people really don't want to see this, right? When you see 11 schools changing, I think that's when people go, oh my God, that's crazy, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the idea that we would do like, 6, 7 as our top number, at least to give us a set of scenarios, seems extremely reasonable to me.
And that number is actually something we actually know. right? We're not estimating, these are real numbers, real students. So that is the most valid data. So weighting that first makes more sense. And then I think we should also have a discussion as to, among the other things in academics, transportation, discipline, what is it that we think we should rank order as our next choice for filtering? And
I'm going to just remind you that for all of these columns, we're into the confidence error. What's it called? Confidence. There's a thing. Sciencey people.
Interval.
Confidence interval, right? We're into confidence interval for all of these things. So we could rank them on these, but it's not exactly clear whether that's meaningful. I think this, like you said, is absolutely for sure meaningful. It is the one thing that we actually know. The one thing we know.
And that really narrows it down to, like, less than 10 choices.
And right now, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dorian.
I absolutely agree with that. And then I think what I would go to next would be economic disadvantage, eliminate the long walks, reduce the number of kids doing long walks.
Okay, so I'm gonna go, oh, look at that, filter by color. I didn't even know I could do that. Okay, learn something new every day. So let's do less than or equal to, I think Dan had 250 when he ran it. What does that do us? We were at 29, now we're at 27. That's not tight enough. We're gonna tighten that baby up a little bit more. Less than or equal, let's do 200.
Do we feel like that's the way to go, the economic disadvantage, as opposed to everybody, recognizing there's not that much of a difference between them? That's my instinct of where to start or where to go next.
Yes, absolutely.
Less than or equal to, I'm going to make it, as Dan did, I'm going to make it what it is for the current one, right? Because we don't want to make it worse. Let's see what happens if we do that. We get 9. So we only set 2 criteria here. We said we are not going to allow more than 7 changes, and we are not going to allow the number of economically disadvantaged students who have to walk 1 to 1.5 miles to be more than the predicted by the current feeder pattern. Does that seem good?
Yeah, how many is that?
I get 9.
I think we should look at them.
All right, let me open it up on the other thing and make sure I still get 9 on the other one and didn't make a mistake, because that would be bad.
Is there anything else red in the sheet? Just any other major outlier?
I only put red on the, hang on a minute, where am I? I only put red on these 2 columns, and I did that very intentionally because we all know, and Dr. Rodman is going to tell us over and over again, that there's nothing red in this bunch. We left all the red ones behind on the other spreadsheet, right? So I only went into yellow on these guys. I did go to red on these because they are red. Okay, now I have to find my other document. Okay, now I'm going to filter this down to 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to filter this down to
I feel like we're playing some dating game, and we're like some like online TV dating game when we're about to reveal like who we've just married, or at least like to actually go on a real date with. I guess that would be the better analogy. Who am I going out to dinner with?
Will the school board want to bring the choices home to mom?
All right, I think I got it. I got to hide the columns so that I can click the plus button and reveal them for you guys. I have 9. I'm just double checking that they're the same 9. That would be also bad if they turned out not to be the same 9. Let's see. Sort smallest to largest. Sort smallest to largest. And we got, there's only 9 of them, so I don't even need a spreadsheet to do this. I can do this in my head, sort of. 6146, 6146, C, 60348A, 6. They're the same. I love it when a plan comes together. Okay, now I just need to figure out how to operate Teams and switch to the other screen. All right. Ta-da! This looks exactly the same, except when I go like this, we'll see the actual scenario names. I can also make this go away. Show tabs only. Can we get all 9 of them on the same? I might need to shrink this down just a little bit. Is that small enough that you guys can see? Can you guys actually see?
Yeah. Yep.
North Albany, Myers, and Hackett. Unlike a set, a scenario really matters which one you're going to, right? Wow, that's surprising.
And could you just zoom in just a little bit more on the left-hand side of the sheet?
Yes, I can. I'm trying to do it without making it so small that we can't see them. I mean, without making it so we can't see them all on the same page. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's do that. I'm gonna do that. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I've got these. These are my numbers. Leftover numbers. 1, 2. Sorry, you guys. I'm sure it's making you insane that I'm wiggling them around like this. Oh,
I'm sorry. I'd like to see why, in situation and for row 14, why B was selected and not A. In some ways, I know it's probably due to distance.
Sure, yeah, we can totally look at that, but it's going to have to do, it probably has to do with the number of changes. So you're interested in this. I'm going to highlight this guy so that we don't lose track of it.
Well, technically, A is usually the least number of changes, and they can go up to F with the most number of changes.
That's just coincidental. I think the A through F was alphabetical. It didn't have to do with the number of changes because I didn't know what the number of changes were when I made the letters.
Oh, really? Because I'm looking at one of these changes, the one where it showed 12 schools changing, and I can see all the same scenarios. It's just somewhere.
I know.
5,
I noticed
7.
that too, but it's just fluky. But let's pull it up. We can do that. I'm putting these all back. Let's do this. We're going to highlight this. I can't highlight. Why can I not highlight? Okay. And let's see. Data. Here. So we've got them all back, and now we'll just sort this guy like this. And now find, go. All right. A. This is the A version, and there's some more of my random leftover numbers. Sorry about that, you guys. All right. The A version was different in what way? The A was the same as the B for who goes to North Albany, and it just switched these two groups.
Yeah.
Right? And so the answer of why it wasn't this, because A would have been selected, it must have to do with the transportation down here. 199 walkers, and we set it at 155. So why would that be? Let's try and figure it out. If we can just think about it, we won't always be able to figure it out, but A has because maybe Ash students live closer to Ash, which is close to Montessori. I mean to Myers. Sorry, the double M's makes me crazy. So maybe that's why if Ash has to go to Hackett, as they do in this scenario, they end up in the long walk zone. I don't know if that's true, but that would make logical sense to me.
Okay.
All right. Let me set it back now, and then I'm going to mark them all. I'm going to get rid of all these random numbers, and then I'm going to mark them so that we can easily get back and forth if we need to. Sorry. Okay. Goodbye, random numbers. I don't even remember what that was from. Some activity I was doing. Okay. Now, we wanted to do 4, 5, 6, 7 here. And this puppy is number of filters, less than or equal to 155, 9 scenarios, and I'm gonna put an X in each of these guys. Okay. Now we can easily get them back if we want to look at something else. I am very surprised by how many of these babies have New Scotland going to North Albany. That seems surprising. I would not have expected that. I would have expected sort of an equal distribution. I'm going to sort this by this just because I think it's been an important thing for people to think about. Oh, do I have this still? I think I still do. This is also another useful way to look at this data. The colored blocks are the schools that change, right? So in this scenario, there are 4 changes. New Scotland is going to North Albany, Arbor Hill is going to Hackett, SA is going to Myers, and Giffen is going to North Albany. So if you just track these gray blocks, it shows you who the changing schools are.
We can probably take out row 57 or 26 because it's the same item. It's just a different, I
see what you're saying. Yep. A and C, they're the same set, 2 different scenarios in the same set. And they're awfully close in every way, right?
Right.
Yeah. What is different about them?
Probably the distance walked again, yeah.
Numbers, there's 7 changes in 57 and 5.
Right. Okay, so let's take out this one.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna remove this. I'm gonna mark remove similar to 61546A. All right, and now I go over here and I can go like this. And it's gone forever. Let me sort them by scenario. That was smart, Bill. Good thing you're here. I'm going to sort them and see if we have any other pairs. Nope. Well, we went from 9 to 8. That's something. Do we have any reaction to Arbor Hill? I wish we had somebody from Arbor Hill here. I don't know how close they feel to their North Albany community. Where SA and SPA are a little more geographically distant, right? But Arbor Hill is right there next to them, and I'm always trying to be sensitive to the fact that that community has had a lot of redlining and various other negative impacts of systemic racism, and so, you know, sort of paying special attention to that seems sensible to me in our effort to be more equitable in our approach.
So I'll just jump in and say, at once upon a time, Arbor Hill went to Myers, right, prior to us changing the feeder pattern. I think they're more tied to their Arbor Hill community in terms of their elementary school. I remember when we were having the conversation about where we should put a middle school, they were very committed to their school being an elementary school on that plot of land. And I think I would just also bring up the, you know, it's not a walkable, right, experience for them because of the, you know, the design of the factories and such on the way to and from Arbor Hill and North Albany, which is why we gave those North Albany families, when we closed the elementary school, the option to go to schools where they would have the ability to be eligible for transportation. So, I mean, I know Roz does have a very active parent group, and if it's a topic we want to bring back to them for consideration, we can. But I, you know, just my memory of, you know, what we've gone through with the Arbor Hill community, they've been focused on their elementary school more so.
Okay. That's helpful, Cecily, because I do remember them being very, very focused on keeping their neighborhood school. Marina?
I would say that I think it would be a very good practice for us. This sort of a question, Anne, that you raised, I think it needs to go back to the school and to the parents and the community there. It shouldn't be I don't think that we should be answering that. I think we should gather the answers and make a determination afterwards.
I think that the superintendent is thinking about doing some sort of small group meetings, trying to get some vested parents in potentially impacted schools to vote, to have a voice in not just a survey, but something where they could have a more nuanced conversation. I think that was her thinking. She's nodding, so I'll take that as a yes.
Yes, that's part of the discussion that we've had before as we look to set up those meetings, not, having them with specific communities. That's why we're working with the community schools coordinators to set up those meetings. I know Mr. Lesko has been working to see what those dates would be after tomorrow's meeting, looking at when we would set those up so that we have that interaction and get that direct communication.
So I guess that one of the things I know that I suspect is going to happen, although I'm really interested to hear what comes out of the focus groups, and I'm just trying to decide if we can get tighter than 9 before the 8. We got rid of 1, so we're down to 8. I'm trying to decide if we can get closer than 8 before we try and get the focus groups. I mean, you guys all have spent a lot of time with this data. You have sort of a good sense of how the whole thing works. I feel like 8 is a lot to ask people to internalize. So I'm just wondering if there's anything we could do. And the things that come to mind as plausible are transportation data and the, actually, let me do it this way because it makes it skinnier. The number of students changed, right? If we do this, this was one of the things I thought was interesting, that this scenario, even though it has 5 changes, actually impacts fewer students than this one, which has 4 changes, which I assume it has to do with, well, let's see who's moving. I mean, I know Montessori is a small school and Arbor Hill is pretty small and Dual is pretty small. So there's 3 small schools moving. And this is New Scotland and Giffen are both quite big. Wait, did I get that right? New Scotland, Arbor Hill is small, but New Scotland and Giffen are both big. So I guess that's what it is. It's just interesting. So that if we wanted to look at that, if we thought that was an important characteristic, it would take this scenario out, which I also think people are going to have a hard time understanding why Montessori would move to Hackett. Like, I just think people are going to be like, what's the point of that? But I don't know, that's one.
And that one is both our only 7 school change and the largest number of student changes, right? So it does look like an obvious sort of next one to chop off the chopping block, unless there's something else great about it, like it's so much better than the others in terms of.
Let's go look over here. It does have a really nice dark green here. These green shows me that it's doing a good job on economic disadvantage, having a lot of a relatively small number of people in that long walk zone. But not more than this one or this one. They're all relatively close, actually. If I highlight them all, if I can get my mouse to work, they all run between 126 and 151, and that's 129. So it's, they're all pretty tight. Are we comfortable with getting rid of that one? So at least get us down 1 more. Let's see thumbs. Thumbs up on, or thumbs down. I'm sorry, thumbs down on that scenario. Okay. Remove only 7 and largest. I don't know why my caps lock is on. Largest number impacted. Guess what? That was the wrong place anyway.
The same thing can be said about, what is it, scenario 2622. I can't see. Oh, yeah.
Let's see.
The other one that has Montessori going to Hackett.
Montessori at Hackett. Hackett.
It's this one, line 34.
There's 2.
Oh, yeah.
These both do.
Let's see how they do.
What is the difference between these two? Why are they so similar? This is the same, right? Match. Ah, SA and SPA are flipped.
It's not a match, yeah.
They're not a match.
The groupings of the schools are different.
Yeah, this is the same, but SA and SPA are flipped here. Is there any reason? I'm terrible at my SA and SPA scatter plots. Does anybody still have those maps? Is there any reason why we would prefer either SA or SPA to go to Myers? I remember there was opinions about this. Again, Marina is right. We should speak to the families that are involved. On the other hand, we do need to like try and get us down to some rational number before we do that.
I do have the maps. I'm pulling them out.
Oh, poop. I'm just getting rid of the formulas so that I can highlight those things so that we can see what's going on.
Their scatter plot maps look really surprisingly similar in terms of where their students live.
Okay.
Kind of interesting. I don't think it leads us really toward much of anything.
All right.
Can we scroll all the way
to the right? You know what I'm going to do? I'm
Yes.
going to hide a bunch of this stuff because we're not really looking at this stuff, right?
And Ann, can we talk about line, I'm sorry, I can't, and I have my reading glasses on. It looks like it's line 14 where it has toast, ash, SPA, and SA.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about that. That configuration concerns me.
Okay.
If we can just talk through the data piece and how.
Yep, let's look at it. I remembered catching this one. This one kind of caught me off guard too. So one thing we can do, I'm trying to think the best way to do this. Well, why don't we look at each? I think we have to do it on the source data. Copy. I'm just going to try and look at this together with us. If I put this up here, then it will be frozen. Why? Because I agree, it's sort of like, why is that, right? We know, what do we know about our schools based on this? We know with great confidence that Montessori and New Scotland are outperforming, right? Right, that's no news to anyone. It's been that way for quite some time. So if I look at our scenario here, we have Montessori and New Scotland in two different schools, right? So that seems good. That seems consistent. But then the question is, who comes next, right? What's next?
Ash.
For balance. It is Ash, but it's also dual. Where's Ash? If you see the way these played out, one thing that's built into the model that's a little weird is that neighborhood schools bring with them new entrants. Magnet schools do not, right? Because we know we feed our magnets. Oh, and actually I should be down here. That's not the right. I'm glad I even said that because then I'll make sure I get to the right spot. The difference between those numbers up there at the top and these ones that I'm going to get to if I can ever get my mouse to work. This has a weighted average. Ignore the blue. That was me figuring out an error I had, which I figured out. The ones at the top that we were looking at before are just the returning students. This here at the bottom is a weighted average, including the new entrants that come along for the neighborhood schools. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I mean by when I say they come along, right? We looked at geographically where we have new entrants, and we know we feed them based on their geography. So we divided the new entrants, which we anticipated to be, I think, 74 once we took out self-contained students. Right. So the average over the years has been over the last 3 years was 84, of which In the past, 32 were self-contained out of the 255 new entrants we've had over 3 years. So we took a fraction, 12.549%. There it is. So out of our 84, 10.6 we are assuming are going to be self-contained, just because that's what it's been historically, leaving us with 74 almost new entrants. And then what do we do with those new entrants? Well, we looked at the way that the new entrants have played out. These are actual new entrants per year, right? This is true, real data. This isn't an estimate. This is really what happened. And we looked at that by a percent, right? All these zeros are the, oh, shoot. All the zeros are the magnet schools, right? Where we see these lines. Because we don't feed any new entrants based on a magnet. They're only fed on the neighborhood schools. Okay, so we end up with taking our 74, using these percentages and distributing them across the schools. And then if we go back way up to the top, here they are again. There's a, I took out the special ed kids too somewhere in there. Wait, what did I take out? There's a reason for that being 5. Hang on, I just remember. New entrants. Oh, some of them go to AIC. We assume some of them, 30 a year, go to AIC. And then the ones that are left. And the AIC number was also taken as a proportion of existing AIC enrollment to new entrants. Okay, so back to Lori's question. What does that mean to us? It means that, I'm going to hide these columns so I can see that column. Toast and Ash are both magnet programs. So they're going to look, they're going to act better than we might think, because the neighborhood schools that we would think would be comparable to them, like Toast, Eagle Point, Pine Hills, are going to be depressed slightly because of the new entrants who we know generally perform less well. So Lori, I think that's why the math worked out that way. I'd have to actually work out the exercise, which I could do not, well, I'm on a Zoom call with 12 other people, but I could work out the actual math to prove it out, to make sure that that's what really happened. But I think that's what it is that Toast and Ash are going to look better by comparison to New Scotland, Eagle Point, and DCS than we would expect.
And when you look at where you have this, Anne, when you go down the list, looking at Toast and Ash, they're right next to each other. They are within proximity, almost across the board.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know,
this is the big
composite. There are 2 areas. There are a few areas where there's a difference, but they are, majority of those areas, they are very similar.
And again, these are weighted averages with the returner, which is a reduction off of the standard district-wide person, right? So we did not have the data to say, if you're a new entrant and you live in the New Scotland neighborhood, you will behave more like a New Scotland person. Every returner, no matter where they lived in the city, we treated as if they were going to behave the same academically, discipline, attendance wise, because that's the best data we had, which, you know, that may be artificially depressing certain neighborhood schools, right? I don't know whether there's enough economic diversity in our schools that we just see a different kind of new entrant in the Eagle Point neighborhood than we do in the Giffen neighborhood. I don't know. We didn't have data for that.
I don't know that.
Let's see. So I hear Lori saying just like general discomfort. Is this the only one where Spa and Sa are together? No, they're together here too. But it's Montessori instead of Toast. At one point, we had talked about a general rule that we would take our bottom 3 performing schools, Giffen, Sa, and Spa, and try and put 1 in each, right? We didn't need to do that in order to get the composites to work out, but if we wanted to do that, we would lose this one. Let me give us a highlight. We'd lose that one because sans bar together. We'd lose this one because sans bar together. Giffen sa. Where's spa? Oh, we'd lose this one because spa is still with Giffen. This looks like a very strange scenario to me. Giffen sa, spa, Giffen sa, spa. We'd lose this one. Yeah, I don't think we can enforce that and end up with enough scenarios. Because if we tried to enforce that, we'd be only left with these two. Which seems like a bad idea, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't be able to do.
Why is there a format painter on there? Does anybody else find this a little too weird? I don't know why. It's maybe just my desire for things to be balanced. This 5 small schools and 3 larger schools just feels weird to me. I think that's the only one that's not 4 across the board. I don't know that that's a reason to discount it. I'm just noticing it.
Some of the scenarios are very interesting because while I can appreciate that this first one has, it feels it's concerning, having these groupings. If you look at the numbers, I mean, I'm drawn to the numbers too, so I have to, I'm trying not to see them, but then I look across and I see all the mostly green, and I'm like, well, should we discount that?
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's where, Dr. Robbins is really trying to guide us not to put too much, not to believe that there's reliable data here just because there's numbers with decimal points. That if in fact there's a 0.4 confidence interval, I don't know if that's even the proper way to use that term, but let's just pretend that I know what I'm talking about. If this one is not 1.8, but it's 1.4, and this one is not 1.1, but it's 1.5, they actually switch places, right? Like we just don't know enough to know.
Just to be clear, the data are reliable and valid. They're just not precise. So I think, we've worked really hard to have a data-driven process. So I'm glad your eyes are drawn to the numbers, because I think in a way, if sometimes the numbers are a little surprising based on what we kind of thought we'd see, that's not a bad thing. And to try and force the numbers to fit into kind of a preconceived notion of what you thought you'd find goes against the idea of being data-driven. But we do need to kind of make sure there's nothing funny going on with the numbers, which is what Ann and I have spent a lot of time these last few weeks trying to do.
Right. Right, and then the other thing that I'm drawn to, I mean, I know that this is not this column of the discipline counts that is not necessarily better. I am intrigued by some of these numbers that are like deeply green, and I think it might be useful to know. If I remember the definition correctly, discipline was the number of referrals that don't necessarily, that means repeated referrals,
There's
right?
2. This one, BJ, total disciplinary count, is the total number of discipline events.
Right.
This one, BN, is the number of students who had any discipline events. If they had 1 or they had 10, they count 1 here. So this is a count of humans. Actually, I forgot to say that when I see the spreadsheet, because one of the things I try to do is where there's a blue, they call these data bars, that means I'm counting people. Where there's no data bar, I'm counting something that's not people, right? So if you see a blue bar, that's why these 4 are grouped together, because these are counting people, or the difference between people. So this discipline is count of students, and if you open it up, you can see what the model would project right? So this says 7 because the model projects North Albany would have 15 students with disciplinary infractions. Myers would have 22, and you subtract Hackett's in the middle, so it doesn't count. You just take the biggest one and the littlest one. And that's why the smaller number is your ideal scenario, because this, if the data were perfectly precise, would mean that we would have guaranteed equal number of disciplinary students, students with discipline issues at the 3 schools. It's not precise. We know it's not precise, but could it be more? Like, is it worth doing this? I'm going to hide that again, right? And if you did that, it would, you know, bring to the top that one, right? I don't know. I just don't know which one of these things you would want to consider more important. That I kind of like the color coding because it lets you kind of take a step back from the numbers and go like, okay, I don't know about this exact number, but there's a lot of green in this row, right? This row makes me happy. It looks happily green. Whereas this one has yellow.
If you scroll down a little bit, I don't know if we can pick the best one, but is it possible to just eliminate it based on, like, we'll take the least best, you know, off at a time? I mean,
all right, let's try it. So this one has a lot of yellow, right?
Yeah.
What I'm sorted right now by something which I can't remember.
I think you're sorted by BN.
Yeah, students with any disciplinary issues. Which oddly,
I would love to remove the it's line 32 now. I can't really see the numbers. 791, the toast ash spa saw one.
Yeah, you really want to take that one off, huh?
I do.
Okay. I'm happy to take it off, Lori, and I totally trust your judgment. And one of the things that I have learned in my many years of doing things where I am the least knowledgeable person in the room about the specificity is that sometimes people can't even explain exactly why. They just know it won't work. It's just their many years of experience. And it's fine if you just have to say, I just know it won't work. But is there anything more you can tell us about why that particular one bothers you? Because
I feel like with putting toast spot and saw. Go ahead, Quita. Did you?
One of the things that I think we need to think about with regard to the discipline referrals and some of the resources that we have to utilize in some of our schools. And so we have to look at that. Sometimes that's going to weigh in with regard to that.
I hear you. I totally hear you. It is not the worst in terms of the discipline issues, though. Right? If you actually look at the numbers, and again, these numbers just may not be indicative of reality, but if I look at the number of discipline counts and we say that's our problem, well, then this is the one we should make go away. These 3 actually are grouped together in a lot of disciplinary issues, but that could have been one kid who was just like a repeated, you know, one kid in each school. I'm going to sort on this one too. Where's our friend that Lori wants to go? It's not that one. It's the toast one. This one.
32.
Yeah. Is everybody okay to just yield to Lori's professional experience that this one just feels wrong to her?
I think it's a little bit more than just feeling wrong. And I would absolutely support that because, again, some of the information that we're looking at is going to be more current than what may be presented here. And we're also looking at some of the resources that we're utilizing in certain areas.
All right, it's gone.
I would support that as well.
I have made it disappear. I have the power. So we're now down to 6. 6? Yes, 6. Oh wait, was there something in the chat a second ago? I think somebody said something. One thing we did.
Celia had a comment with regard to making sure that we're deciding some of the factors to narrow down. We have to make sure that we're remembering that we're going to have family and community input. And And just with conversations that are directly being held, there are significant variance in the number of families who prefer a bus versus who prefer being close to home. And so we'll have to, parcel that out as well.
So,
and that is something we need to think about when we use the factor of the 1 to 1.4, where we are saying that we want less walkers, right? But parents may want to think about, well, it's a half an hour walk, or by the time I wait for the bus and it's a longer, bus ride, it might be an hour and 15 minutes. And that's a choice that they'll have to make, whether they prefer walking that half hour, even though it's 1.5 up to 1.5 miles, or spend 1.5 hours or 1 hour 15 minutes in the bus. And with bus drivers and all these shortages we've been facing, that might be a big thing that they might think about. So
I hear you. I don't know if everybody's been following that Bethlehem is going to increase their walk zone because they don't have enough drivers. So they're going to make their walk zone around their high school bigger. They're going to match us now 1.5 because they just don't have enough bus drivers to run the, at least they've been talking. I don't know if they've made the final decision. I just know their board's been talking about it. I hear what you're saying, Sridhar. I do remind you all that we got to 9 by using that criteria. So if we're going to second guess that criteria, we shouldn't do it like sort of after having made that decision. We should kind of go back and rethink whether that's something we can that we want to enforce, because I can't remember. I have them picked over here, so I could take this off and we'd still be able to go back. But we have this set to be less than or equal to 155, so that we would not increase the number of students in the long walk zone. I'm going to take that off. I don't think we're going to be happy because, wait a minute. Oh, I had this one set. That was cheating. That brings us to 29. So if we're not going to use that factor, we need to use something else to bring us back down. Because 29 is a large number.
If you do that and make it 6 or fewer changes, what do you get to?
Can we go back to what where are we?
Hang on a minute. That brings us to 10. They're not necessarily the same. So, Superintendent, we were revisiting the question of whether that 1 to 1.4 long walk is really determinative in response to Talea's comment. And Talea, I wish I could talk to you directly, because one of the things I struggle with is this concept of close to home, because there's so few of our students that are actually close to their middle school. Like, I think that the survey language about close to home was not didn't necessarily give people a practical way to answer. Yes, we all want to go to middle school close to home, but we don't have middle schools close to home. So if we wanted to maximize closeness to home, we could try and maximize the number of kids who are in the under 1.
I also would say that the survey that the district already did was not representative of the whole district, right? So it was overrepresented by certain communities. So that's not, the perception of what is close to home is a little more skewed, I think.
Can we use the student data not as it's very specific, but just in like a general, like how they'll stack up to the other scenarios, like for column BZ, like the number of higher risk, is that a range, or I'm not sure, but like, can we say that line 50 is almost always going to be more than line 20, even if they might both change a little? Like, is it worth doing any narrowing down based on these numbers? Like, you just take the one that's the lowest ranked in any category, or are they all subject to too much variance?
Well, since you asked the question, I just sorted that by the range, and if it does sort of, there's a lot of yellows in here, right? So whatever the problem, whatever's going on with that data, it does seem sort of consistently to not be one of our strongest scenarios. It was one of the original 9. We have right now these 3 were added when we when we reset that transportation criteria. So we could take this one out on the grounds that it's just sort of meh all the way across. What do we got? And this is the problem. We're so close that we just don't have enough reasons to choose things. Claire had said at one point to wonder about parent PTAs. That was her comment that she sent by email last time. I know Ash, Montessori, New Scotland, Dual definitely have a strong PTA. I don't know if there's any impact, if that's sufficient information for us to do anything with. I'm just responding to her suggestion.
And what happens if we sort by attendance?
Attendance. This one, B, this attendance or this attendance?
Look, the other one, less than 90 range. Yeah, BR.
Okay, yep. So these are our students who take resources because we have a lot of truancy responsibilities for them. And these ones down here have a very disparate attendance issues. Actually, that's really interesting because it's kind of like a break, right? It's a natural break in the data. These four are all very questionable on attendance, and then there's a big jump and these all look better.
The way the model's built, the composite is kind of intended to be, if you're going to sort by something, you should see the darkest green and the most consistent green if you sorted by that, because it takes all of it into account. Not perfectly, but it takes everything into account. So like the ones with a composite range of 1.5 or less, I would think would be mostly dark green.
And they are, yep. I just sorted by that. And this, the discipline count one is one that we recognized up here is just not quite, oh my, I don't know what happened here. But with the exception of this column, which has its own unique characteristics for reasons I don't understand, the rest of these do seem to sort together. So you could just like start knocking things off from the bottom here.
Let's hide that BJ column.
Hide BJ. Okay, making it go away for you. So if we were to cut these bottom 3 or 4, we lose one of the few that only had 4 changes. We're down to only one left that has 4 changes.
And I'm sorry, the color carries through, so like 44, the composite range means it's worse than current?
No, it means they're worse. When I did the formatting, I highlighted the whole column. So internal to the column, this green is only relevant to other greens within its column. Does that make sense? Like you can't draw any conclusion. Dark green is the best thing in that column, but it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I guess like AP 40. Let's scroll down a little. Like basically, can you make 1.5 the composite range? Because you could say the current schools are 1.5 as a composite range.
I could. I didn't do it that way, and I can't do it that way on the fly. Well, I mean, the current one is 4.3.
Oh. Okay.
Right. That's what's in this light blue here. They're all way better than the current one. We're not.
Okay. So the color. All right. I didn't know what the color meant. Sorry.
Yeah, the color was just an internal, like, hey, good, bad kind of thing. But the current is for the composite is 4.3. We're super far above that.
If you look at the initial sheet that we started with, there was the greens, there was the yellows, and there was the reds. So when we did these things, all those reds were automatically taken out. So they're still there, but they're hidden away now from our selection.
Right, and I only used red in these 2 columns because I was trying to send the mental imagery that all of these are good. There's no red because we left all the red ones behind on the other sheet, right? We only took the top 20%. We left 80% behind. So we were already well into the yellow category. That's why there's, if I were to unhide everything, we got red for the number of schools and the number of students impacted, but all these only go to green to yellow.
So I know we don't, maybe we don't want to make it as tight as we can't have more kids walking over a mile than now, but like, can we set it at 200? So it's, 30% more, but just some, because that's some amount you could limit this on.
So there was a motion before to use the pink economic disadvantage column. So I'm just sorting by that. And if we use that as our primary indicator, there are 2 that are very close to 200 that we could potentially get rid of. And those were 2 that were, those were the 2 that were added back, right? Because we used to have that set at 155. And so they're still in there. This is interesting. This scenario right here, this is almost exactly the old Myers feeder pattern from before we rejiggered everything with when Brighter Choice closed, right? It used to be Montessori. Cecily's like, yeah, that looks familiar, right? It was Montessori.
I was on that committee too when we tried to build equitable schools when we closed Livingston.
It's like your life is a big looping. But that at least for Montessori and for Myers, that looks very familiar. But we used to have Spa and SA and Pine Hills.
Right.
How do we fit in the? Oh, because Ash and Pine Hills only went to 5th grade or went to 6th grade, so we didn't have their 6th graders in the building. Okay. Okay. I don't know what to do. I wish I had a more definitive approach, you guys. I hear Dr. Robbins say if you're going to sort by anything, sort by the composite range, right? If we did that and we just dropped these 3, is there
and the one that Lori suggested? Or are we?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to drop that one. That one's gone. It's just showing because I haven't hidden it. That one's gone. But
so the way this is all played out, dual moves in this set it's 2. There are 2 where dual doesn't move and all the rest dual moves. In the earlier set it was 1 out of 9. And the dual community right now is super sensitive, having parents feel like you just forced me to move schools to a school that doesn't have a playground, doesn't have a library, blah, 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 blah. Like you'll hear all the complaints. So I feel like eliminating those 3 eliminates both. Basically, it says dual is definitely moving again, which will be very upsetting to that school community, which I realize is teeny weeny. So maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe this is what the numbers dictate. Excuse me.
I hear you.
Yeah, it's just interesting how it's played out that way.
It's also interesting, though, that that's interesting.
I wonder why that is. Like when you showed us the column earlier that showed how many schools are moving. The dual always has more moves in every scenario. And I mean, not quite as much since we've sort of eliminated the first set of
I wonder if it's because, and I could go back and try and figure it out, because of the double dual factor. Dual has an outsized impact because every scenario had to meet the dual small and dual large criteria.
Right.
So that maybe has something to do with it. I don't know why that would be, but that's the only thing I could think of.
In this case, this new set, New Scotland, actually is even worse. If your goal is to avoid moving, New Scotland moves even more in this current set than the previous one.
Yeah, which is also just really strange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the number of moves is not sort of distributed evenly across the various sets we're looking at.
Yeah, and you wouldn't expect it to be distributed perfectly evenly, but I am a little surprised that it's not more distributed more evenly. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to get it so that you guys can see all of these things without needing to get a microscope out. The other question, which we have not talked about at all, is whether we want to expend any thought on the cost of busing. So the current feeder project pattern would project we would bus 1,000 students in middle school. And these vary from, that's a 1032, from 1001 up to an additional 100. So it's from 30 less to 100 more. 100 kids is probably, I don't know how much money that equals, but it certainly has fiscal implications if we're providing additional busing. If this guy were not at the bottom of the list anyway, let's see, I think I said that wrong. Let's sort this. And let's go over here. Are there any that are very low and also very expensive? Yeah, like this guy is at the very bottom of the list and is the most in terms of the composite and is the most expensive in terms of busing and doesn't impact the dual factor. Right? Oh, yes, it does. Oh, no, if I take that off, yeah. So can I make a recommendation that we at least get rid of this guy here?
Yep.
You live with that? Anybody see any compelling reason to keep this? Arbor Hill. There's other scenarios that have Arbor Hill staying at North Albany. So make it go away.
Yeah.
Okay, people are nodding gently. I'm going with, all right, removed because most busing and forest composite. I will correct all the typos later. Little known fact, I'm a terrible speller. Okay, we're down to 8. We were at 6 a while ago, but we put more back.
What about 27?
27.
That also is like 1,122, right? In the
Busing. Mm-hmm.
Busing. So
it's not a bad one in terms of composite, but it is expensive in terms of busing. I mean, if we just want to go based on that, I would do this. That would be the next most expensive busing.
well, and really, is there a big difference between 50 and 56? Really, 110 versus 122? Don't know. It's 10 more kids.
Yeah, it's always like that. You're always sort of eking away, and
Yeah, all the others are less than 1,100.
Actually, if you're going to get rid of one of these two, I would be inclined to get rid of this one because you're right. The cost impact is like inconsequential, but look at the difference in the composite scores, or even this one, which I think gets us back to our dual problem. But you know, these bottom 3 are very expensive in terms of busing, or more expensive than the others. I don't know if it's truly impactful. We're just scrounging for reasons here. And then
I would at least leave one that doesn't move dual from where it is right now, and that's
okay.
number 44. But I think the other two, or the one with the worst composite, actually.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I was saying, I think that those two, 50 and 56, I think I would be okay with it going. But if we were only get rid of one, I would get rid of the one with the worst composite.
This one. All right, so let's get rid of this one for now, unless I see somebody looking to.
I
Wait
think
a
I'd
minute.
get rid of both if you're increasing busing. 10%.
What's that?
I think I'd get rid of both if you're increasing busing by 10% for both and not for multiple others.
And I'm just gonna drop this one for now, busing and bed composite score. Okay, and we're gonna take this one, this like this, and this like this.
And then you have 5, which is a
now
manageable number.
6. Well, are we ready to get rid of another one? Which one? This one?
I thought you were gonna, yeah.
Yep. Busing expensive.
Interesting. The one with Montessori is the worst. I mean, I want to keep for sure one with Montessori for the same, almost the opposite reason what Dorian said. I can't imagine showing our community a set of scenarios that doesn't have Montessori at North Albany. That just seems insane to me. But it is interesting that it's the one that's remaining there is not the least good of these excellent choices, as they're all roughly equitable. And we've got 5. All right, these 2. Look at this, you guys. We didn't do this on purpose. It just happened. We took our eye off of the column. And all of the ones that are left have 6 changes.
So
Go ahead, Dad.
I was going to say, I hate to do it. What happens if you add 7?
You just like to play with data.
I really do. Don't do it. I'm sorry. I won't do that. I'm sorry.
I'm going to have to spend some time figuring out exactly what we've done here, because we've done it so sort of like piecemeal. I don't know if I can get back to exactly what we did without this.
Click the filter button above the column. Can you just click the 7?
Well, yeah, I can't click the 7 because there are no 7s, because I've got this set to be all the ones that we have removed. But I can do that, and then I can take away again the ones that we removed. Hang on, removed. Keeping added X and my friend dual. If we do that, we get way too many, 23.
Okay, never mind.
Are we doing the right thing to prioritize the cost of busing over the number of students who have to change schools? Is that the right decision?
And how come I'm looking at 6?
Well,
I thought we were down to 5. What did I do wrong, you guys?
You didn't have 60348A in there previously. And I was curious why that left.
No, that's the one I marked as keep for dual.
Oh, you took out the one on the top.
No, B was in there. That B was in there. A had left, and I was going to ask why A was not in there anymore.
Didn't we take out
You know what
14?
I bet I had it scrolled up like this. I bet there were
Yeah,
always
maybe.
6, and I just had it scrolled to the top. That's the only explanation, because I wouldn't have deleted it.
This
You
is
guys-
the
We leave number 14 in, or I thought we had taken 14 out.
Well, you
No,
can't
I think-
necessarily count on 14 staying as 14, because when I sort them, they change order.
But it's
That
line
was
14.
where you went into the data and you found the whole set and you looked at it, and we took one out, but I think now it went back because at some point, like, the choices got reset and
Oh, you think that's what happened? I thought, because I didn't mark it removed. That was the very first thing we did. Bill did it.
Yeah.
Let's see. I can create that though. Hang on a minute, because that one was pretty straightforward. Clear the filter. That was no more than 7 changes. No more than 155, I think.
200, right? Or was it 155?
It was 155 when we started, I think, and then we have, I'm going to sort these based on this, because there was an A and a B. It was a B, and you wanted to know why the A wasn't there. Uh-oh. It was this one, right? 76882B, and we looked to see why the B was chosen instead of the A. We removed it because it was only the only 7, and it had the largest student impact.
No, look up on 50, isn't it? 50 says remove similar to.
Yes, that one was because they were, oh yeah.
I think that was the one.
Okay.
I guess there are a lot that are, the whole set is good.
All right, but let's see what we've got. I have to take off this 155 thing over here because that's preventing the ones that we added later. Clear filter from, where did they go? Oh, now I have to do this. Okay, added. Okay, we're back to 6. I think there were always 6. I think I just had it scrolled up like this and we couldn't see the 6th one. I think that's what happened. Shoot, I thought we could go home, but I think we really do need to get down to 5 somehow through some work.
But now you have 2 that keep dual in where they're supposed to be and where it is, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, can we go back over to the transportation? I'm just trying to see what are the other objective ones that we felt comfortable like trimming.
14 and 32 are the same set, right?
Yes.
So the only thing that would be different is the transportation. So
right, excellent. So we got to get rid of one. Well, that'll take us back down to 1, but still. So between those 2.
But this takes us back to you can't have Montessori not at North Albany in this scenario. So
well, we're gonna keep 1. We're gonna keep one of these 2 and get rid of 1, right? Or we can keep. I'm not opposed to keeping them both, but they are. The only difference between these guys is whether New Scotland goes and Spa and Giffen go to Myers, or whether New Scotland, Spa, and Giffen go to North Albany.
You want to keep the one that puts Montessori at North Albany because that's the only one that does that.
Totally, I do. Yep. So this one goes removed in favor of 60348B. Okay.
Now you're down to 5.
Now we really are down to 5.
Do you want to get to 4 or here we go?
I think you have, you're at 5, but all of them have 6 changes. The roughly the number of students that are going to be impacted or within the same range. You've got composite scores that are, that are pretty reasonably close. You have diversity and I'm not talking in terms of ethnic diversity. I'm talking looking at where schools are going and people can see themselves in different areas. That's where you have almost every option with schools being in multiple areas. So you've got, when we talk about equity, you're looking at a pretty equitable distribution with those 5.
The only thing that's weird about this whole scenario, and I can't quite figure out why this would be, is that North Albany, New Scotland there's no scenario under which New Scotland stays at Hackett. That just, again, seems like a strange set of scenarios to present, that there's none.
Right, and in fact, it goes North Albany. Oh no, all but one.
All but one. So I'm just gonna do this. I just want to see if we were to take.
And do you want to like color code these 5 so that we could get back to them easily?
I did. They're marked with X. They're marked with X. These guys, I can get back to them. But so here's our New Scotland peeps. If we were to, somebody just dropped something in my house. Sorry about that. So in this scenario, what I did was I sorted the New Scotland. The first bunch, New Scotland is, I'm very tired. The first bunch, New Scotland Elementary goes to Hackett. Then starting here, they go to Myers, but there's only 2 where they go to Myers. And then there's a whole slew where they go to North Albany. So the question is, why are none of these?
And in the 60 or so scenarios that were created, do any of them end up keeping New Scotland at Hackett?
Yeah, the ones I have highlighted right now.
And I think they were eliminated because the number of school changes is 7, and it was 6 or fewer.
The only other one would be this one, which we removed because of busing and a bad composite.
You know, I have to say there's a lot to be said. I mean, only 159 students moving compared to the other ones we're considering have, in some cases, 100 more students. There's something to be said to bring that one back if we're trying to pick one to bring back. It's a, 5.
But at the same time, if with 7 school changes, if you look at the number of students,
but that one
moving,
has 5. That one has 5.
No.
That one
What I'm trying to say is that if you move the number of schools changing to 7, I'm going back to what Dan said, the number of students of the change is not that much more, not that much higher.
Right, I have to say, even though we've been talking this whole time about number of schools changing, that's a brilliant point that the number of students changing is actually probably what we care about. We might want to even throw, we could probably hide the column into the number of schools and just look at number of students. I think that's actually captures what we care about, right?
The reason my question is the only thing that we actually know is which schools are changing, right? Even the number of students changing is only is the number of 5th graders minus the retention rate, blah blah. So
yeah. It may be different. It may be different than what we have basically.
Yeah.
So I'll throw a little right turn in there. Technically, they're all changing schools because they're all going to a different middle school. So, I mean.
True, but changing from what you expect.
The purpose, I understand the purpose of what we're talking about, but the reality is all of the 5th graders are going to change because they're all going to 6th grade in a middle school.
True.
I guess the other reason to think about it in terms of schools is it's sort of a question of like how many angry groups do you create? If you assume that every time you change a school, you end up you've now created an angry group. You could look at it in terms of how many angry groups as opposed to students.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the number of students because it's compounded by the number of grades. So you might have 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade parents or families that are also upset, about that decision. They might not be. Absolutely.
You're right. This number reflects only 5th graders. I think this is just 1 grade. It's just It's just 1 year's worth of families. It's not all the way down. Although I will say now that all of our schools are the same number of grades, that should be proportionate, right? It's not like it used to be where we had some schools with 1 extra grade. I personally would feel more comfortable having at least 1 where New Scotland stays at Hackett. I just think it's like to not present when we know that that's a community that's already, expressing some concern about this process. It makes it feel like the process is fixed, and And this is just the way the data is coming out, which is just so weird.
Well, I guess my question about that is, and I agree, Ann, but do we have scenarios where the other schools,
well, I've got it right on the screen, so let's look. Myers Montessori goes to any of the 3 schools in these scenarios. New Scotland never goes. Yep, New Scotland goes to all the 3 schools. Toast never goes to North Albany for reasons I don't understand, but they go to Myers or Hackett. Ash has the full Monty, 2 of each. Pine Hills mostly stays where it is, but sometimes goes to North Albany. Eagle Point never goes to North Albany. DCS has a full spread, although for some reason only 3. Arbor Hill, North Albany, or Hackett.
DCS also doesn't go to North Albany, right? Just two schools.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. My eyes are getting tired. Thanks, Dorian. Sheridan Prep never goes to Hackett. Okay. And same thing with SA. Giffen never goes to North Albany, which makes sense actually if we're talking about reducing. We limited the number of school changes, and we know Giffen and SA and SPA. Like if we send Giffen, we'd have to pull SA and SPA because they're all relatively low performing schools, and Giffen is so much bigger. And then Dual goes at 1 Myers, 1 Hackett, and 4 North Albany. So was anybody keeping track? Is there anything that we wanted to take another look at based on that?
I think my only wondering is do you leave a New Scotland scenario where they go to North Albany, even though it is 7 changes? If that is something that's important to the community.
I'm sorry, if we leave a what, Seth?
If you leave a New Scotland going to, I'm sorry, Montessori, no, New Scotland not going to North Albany for every scenario. If there's an option where they're not, even if it is 7 changes, just so that people can weigh those 7 changes versus that.
Well, we pulled this one back where New Scotland stays at Hackett for 5 changes. So we did, I think I may have unilaterally done this. I don't know if I had full support of the group and this was a consensus driven decision, but we had pulled this one out for busing.
But that has the low composite, right?
It does.
The lower composite.
Lower, yes, but not the lowest at all. The lowest was, well, 1.99 because we cut off at 2 and this is at 1.8. So
would it be feasible to add the one with the 7 changes?
Sure.
If you add back 7 changes and then make it that there can't be more than 1,100 students bus, so it still has, it'll add more of a bus variable, does that take it down to a reasonable number?
All right, right now I'm on up to 7 changes, and then what did you say, Dan? No more than 1,100 on the bus?
Yeah.
Less than or equal to 1,100. And now I need to remove our friends that we've previously removed. We're at 19.
Can you change that variable to 1075? We'll put that one at what it is, so we're not spending more on busing.
Let me see, hang on a minute. Let me see what we've got. If I were to drop it to 1090, it would drop out 3. If I drop it to 1075, it will drop out, count 6. And are they, okay, I'm going to 1075 and then we'll see what happens. Yeah. We're now at 13. And are they the 6 that we had before? Are they all still in here? No, one of our old ones is not here, just so you know. So we're really at 14. Unless we decide not to bring that back.
It's the one that had Montessori going to North Albany. That was also very expensive.
Okay. I can't, it'd be hard for me to pull it back, but I should have it marked later. But why were we doing this? We were looking for opportunities to make sure that we had a full opportunity for Hackett, for New Scotland to come to Hackett.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we got there, right? Superintendent said, why don't we show them an option that what it looks like to have, what's the best New Scotland goes to Hackett option.
Can you use the composite range to trim a little off the bottom?
Let me see. Composite. Why, yes, I could. What would I be losing? I would be losing one of our New Scott Hackett people. I could make it 1 point.
If you made it 1.9, you'd still have the Montessori goes to North Albany.
Yeah, but you lose dual, don't you? Oh no, you have other options for dual.
Yeah, because we brought a whole bunch of new ones in here. Less than or equal to 1.9. I'm now back to 9. Hang on, let me mark these new ones as new. And then I'm going to bring back the other one because we lost the one, and we'll see where we are. Oh man, I thought we were ready.
But the one you lost was the one that it was 5 changes, but we only brought it back to have New Scotland go to.
I see. So I could take it away again if we didn't think that was necessary. Clear filters. Let me just make sure that I have the entire data. Yes, it's cleared. Okay. So why do you look like that? You're shrimpy. Okay. Okay. So. All right, so we were at 9, now we're at 10 because I brought this guy back. And let's see what's going on with our friends at New Scotland. We have 4 choices for New Scotland now, where they stay at Hackett, out of 10. So can I get rid of that? The reason this one...
It was expensive for busing.
It was, you know, again, we don't really know how much of a factor that is. Actually, I mean, it certainly costs money, right? We know busing costs money. How much money, I don't know.
We brought it back because it only had 5 changes. We like that about it.
Mm-hmm. So I took the list we had there, and now I sorted by composite. If I were to take those 3 off the bottom, which would include that one that only had 5 changes, that would get us back to 7, and it would have 2. We would have 3 with Montessori at North Albany and 2 with Hackett at North Albany, which seems more appropriate.
Yeah, I think that I would be in favor of losing those 3.
Okay. Okay.
When we talk about expensive busing, some of these scenarios might be longer distances for some schools. That might cause more expense also.
Still on the line?
What's that?
Is Ron Lesko still here, Superintendent? I can't.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
I am. Yep.
Yes, he is.
Does our cost for busing proportionate to the length of the ride, or is it just the number of routes?
No, and it's difficult for me to anticipate a scenario here in which our busing changes are going to be different depending upon the scenario. Almost everybody who goes to North Albany is going to need a bus. Probably almost everybody who goes goes to Myers is going to need a bus. There is going to be very little difference, if any, in our transportation expenses, almost no matter which scenario we pick. We don't pay for gas with CDTA. We don't pay for mileage. It's just the number of buses, and we're going to need to add buses to go to North Albany no matter where we end up. And I just don't anticipate a significant difference no matter in the expense, no matter which scenario we end up with.
So it's the routes, it's not the distance.
Right.
And we pay some, do we pay some amount per student for the passes too?
I believe that's how it breaks down, yes.
Mm-hmm. So the quantity of busing has some, it may be a modest cost increase, but there's some.
We're still going to need the same number of buses to, you know, whether it's 20 kids on a bus or 25 kids on a bus or 40 kids on a bus or whatever. It'll be the same number of buses.
Will it increase the number of exchanges? Like, you know, would kids need to take more than one bus to get to the endpoint?
That is not factored into our expenses for transportation, but that is a possibility depending upon how we.
That's going to complicate things, right?
Correct. But again, that's separate from our contract, but that's an impact on families, and students and families for sure, potentially.
I mean, we're definitely going to need more tripper buses no matter what, right? Because we're not running as many trippers to North Albany as we will obviously have to, no matter what scenario we're on.
It will depend a little bit on who goes to Myers in that case, because, you know, if we need fewer trippers at Myers, which I wouldn't anticipate, but it's possible. You know, we could shift buses that we have, and CDTA also has become fairly efficient in designating some of its line routes for service too, and I think it's worked well for North Albany Middle School this year. There are a couple of line routes that serve that building too, and they're not included in our tripper contract. So, so again, I wouldn't anticipate any variance in our CDTA expenses depending upon the scenario. I would expect the possibility of them to go up simply because we will need more buses at North Albany, but that will be the case no matter which schools are enrolled at North Albany.
So based on what Ron is saying, have we overinvested in cutting off that 1,100, the large student busing?
Fearful that we have. Ron, I think you were doing something else we used as a criteria, and we can take it off, but then we're back to square one on some things to look for try and reduce busing on the grounds that, hey, you know, it's another additional expense for the district and we need some way to reduce these scenarios so we can get back down to a rational number. And we started the child-centered one having to do with the long walks, but then there was some pulling back on that because people felt that maybe, in fact, people would prefer a long walk of 1.4 to a bus of 1.6.
I mean, again, that goes to say if I have to take two buses to get from A to B, whereas I can just walk a long distance, I might prefer to do that because then I don't have to risk of missing a bus, no drivers, one bus is late, all of those other complications.
I mean, you look outside right now, the idea of walking 1.5 miles in Albany for most of the year is tough. I don't know. I mean, taking a bus is a pain, but to walk that.
No, Dan, I get that. What I'm saying is, like, right now, there's a crisis where we don't have enough bus drivers. So if a student has to take two buses to get to school and one bus is delayed, they're not going to catch that second bus. So they'll still have to walk if they don't catch the bus to get to school. So, you know, when you just now delayed things, it's not like they're picked up from home and regardless of whether they're going to get it right to school, there's going to be a delay. And people have to think about, am I willing to invest an hour and a half of my time to go from home to school on a bus or two buses, or walk half an hour in this weather? Agreed.
It's too bad that we have no way of looking at the number of students who would have to take two buses, because I do think that's important, that matters, but we just can't. I think we can't get that.
The only thing I was thinking about is, and I do have this data. It might just take me a minute. I might have to go offline and dig around in the columns to figure it out. Hackett is centrally located on the bus lines. Hackett has much better quality bus service than either Myers or North Albany, right? I mean, Hackett, you can walk 10 blocks and you can access almost any bus route in the city from Hackett. Whereas Myers, if you can't take the 106 you're on a tripper bus. Otherwise, you got to walk all the way up to New Scotland and take the 13, or you got to walk to New Scotland and then keep on walking to get over to take the 10 or the 11. So Myers is very, very difficult on the bus. So I would think what that means is that walkers, I'm trying to formulate the thought thoroughly. If you are 1.5 from New Scotland, you have a better chance of being able to get a 1 bus home. If you're 1.5 from North Albany, if we don't have a tripper for you, which of course we don't know because we're going to design the trippers based on where the students live, right? So just because there's not a tripper there now doesn't mean there won't be a tripper there. For example, you know, if Eagle Point were to go to North Albany, there would almost certainly have to be some kind of tripper that would run somehow down Western Avenue, I would think. Anyway, so is there something having to do with Hackett's unique geography that could lead us down some kind of transportation related decision? Because
another interesting feature in these scenarios that show up is that New Scotland never moves to Myers. And I think a lot of the families that are New Scotland and going to Hackett or maybe taking a bus might actually be closer and might walk to Myers. So that's also a possibility. And none of these scenarios show that. Yeah,
and that I think must have to do with enrollment because there were only 2 in the whole kit and caboodle. Let me sort this again, but I believe what we saw when we looked at before. Oh, go away. I don't know. What did I just do? I hate OneDrive. Okay. Oh, no, there were more.
Well, they were all red.
Yeah, they all require a tremendous number of changes. Look at this. Yeah. I don't think so. Well, because if you move, like if you just play it out, if you move New Scotland to Myers, then the Montessori obviously has to leave Myers, right? So it just has this cascading ripple effect. I'm sorry, what were you saying, Shrar?
I was saying, you know, we looked at it more in terms of minimum number of changes, but if do any of those maximum number of changes that we removed still work well for all the other factors?
Well, let's see, I've got no data set right now, so let me sort them. I'm just going to pull up 8 and up because those are the ones we've been kind of excluding out of hand. Okay. Yes, some of them are quite good. Do we want to put in like the best one of these?
I was going to say, if you use the same criteria and pick the best of these, now compare the best that we picked before and these guys, and see are there any other criteria we want to use to eliminate some of them.
Oh, you guys, I'm getting tired. Okay, so if we were going to look at this is a set, right?
If you just mix in the ones we were looking at and sort it by the same composite range, we could probably see, like, to me, they're not that much different than the rest of the other. Like, they just don't, it just doesn't add anything to do that much to the district for no real reason, you know, other than New Scotland.
So right now I have all of the ones. Why am I only looking at 48 and not 60? No, hang on a minute. Clear. Okay. So now I'm back to 60. Should be back to 60. And let's see, you were saying, let's sort it by composite. Okay, this is a straight composite sort. So this is the top set, right? And we have one of them picked, the one with 6 changes. But you were kind of asking, would it be worth it for us to look at, say, something like this, where New Scotland goes to Myers, pushing Montessori to North Albany.
But that has 9 schools changing now, 344 kids.
Yeah, well, that was, I think the idea on the floor was, is it worth it to do that? Is there any scenario under which it's worth it to do that? I'm not arguing that that it is. I'm just playing out the exercise that Sridhar had asked about, which is, would it be worth it to look at any of these? And I guess I don't personally see why we would choose that over this one, which has the same exact equity metrics and impacts fewer kids and families.
Yeah. I think doing that many changes will just result in just sort of a very angry city. Like, what do they think they're doing sitting up there in those offices, moving every kid around the city when we have relationships with teachers and principals and all of that? I just don't think there's a lot to be gained in terms of the family experience.
Yeah, and I don't know, Superintendent, you haven't talked about this at all, but I mean, obviously people's relationships, just like people should not perceive themselves if they are going to go to North Albany as if they're going to go to North Albany as it exists now, right? Like, I think that's going to be the hard part for people psychologically to think about. They're going to say, oh, let's say it's Eagle Point. Eagle Point ends up in North Albany, let's just say. Their initial reaction is going to be to think that they're going to go to North Albany with Sheridan Prep, Schuyler Achievement Academy, and Arbor Hill. But that's not really true, right? We are going to be relocating other schools, and it's going to take some time for people to understand the full picture, that it's not just Eagle Point that's going. Let's say it's Eagle Point and Toast to end up at North Albany, so that there's a whole different mix there. But the other piece I haven't understood at all yet is what that means for staff. Like, we're obviously going to need to move staff around too, because there aren't enough teachers at North Albany for a full-size middle school because it's too small. So there's going to need to be moves made there. So people shouldn't assume that just because they're staying at their school, that everything else at their school is going to stay the same, because things are going to be changing all over.
The nature of the school is going to change too. I mean, if you look back, 10 years, no one wanted to go to Hackett because Hackett was a failing school and whatnot. And now things are different, right? Because it went under receivership and it got that influx of money, things were changed, and now it's great. So, and what we're trying to do is actually make all these schools great, better. So
it's totally true, Sridhar, and I do give credit a lot to the work that Hackett did. But when you actually look at the composite score based on the elementaries that are feeding to Hackett, having nothing to do with Hackett, just having to do with who's feeding to Hackett, this is what you get. This is the current feeder pattern. Hackett is getting a set of students who's less risky than way less in North Albany and Myers about the middle. So it's like, it's very interesting that really was, reflected the student population. Not that I don't give full credit to Mike Panetta and all the work that the teachers and the staff at Hackett have done to turn that school around, because it's been a great school, but it's also dealing with a different set of students. Okay, friends, where are we? Besides tired.
Putting the filters back on, what did we have? We had 7 school changes. We had 250 kids changing.
All right, right now I'm at 7. I will put it at 250, less than or equal to 250 children. 7 schools. And then
composite range. Did you cut it at 1.9 last time?
Dan, I am so grateful that you're here tracking this, because I cannot remember this for the life of me. All right, I'm going to this number filters less than or equal to 1.9 down. Okay, we are now at 11.
And then for the kids traveling over 1.5, I mean, we did set it at 1,100. It's more. It's not, I mean, it's just a number. I guess we could do more, but if you're just trying to say, well, let's just take the most expensive things off the table. And then while we're at it, if you're adding kids, can we just say, well, let's say no more than 300 have to walk over a mile? Some number?
Hang on one second, Dan. I'm just absorbing what we've got now with just the criteria that we've set. We had already removed some of these. I'm trying not to let them sneak back in on us. We're back to 6.
Okay.
With
So
the
now-
criteria you set and not allowing any of the ones that we removed to sneak back in. We are at 6, including 2. Didn't I have other ones marked new? Hang on a minute.
We lost the ones that New Scotland goes to Myers.
Yeah, those didn't meet whatever criteria Dan just set.
Because those all took over 7 changes. Like you just, because once you put.
No, there was one that set 5 changes. It must have been the 200 kids.
Oh, undo that.
Talia texted and just asked me to pass along that the concern for New Scotland is about the distance to North Albany. It's not a concern about like the culture or the other kids there. It's just so much farther than their current situation.
Yeah, I think the problem is that's true for every single school, right?
I think it would be more true for Ash. It's the furthest school from North Albany.
Farther than Eagle Point?
I would think so.
Yeah, although it's not about the school location, right? It's about the students. I'm going to pull up the Ash scatter plot just out of curiosity.
Most would be Giffen, I would think.
So from here, if you had no more than 300 kids can be walking over a mile, like just some limit on that, and not just the economically disadvantaged, maybe. Or I mean, for that you might have to set a lower number just because there's fewer of them.
Well, let me sort one of these columns. It doesn't really matter which. Such a high percentage of our kids are economically disadvantaged. It doesn't matter. If we set it at 300, we only lose 1.
Maybe if you set it at 200 for economically disadvantaged.
I think we did 275 for everybody or 200 for economically disadvantaged. It comes out the same. I say 275. Did I say 275?
Yeah, but you have greater than.
Less than, right?
I know what I'm doing. Sure I do. Less than or equal to 270. It must be 175 though, right? Must not be 275. Yeah, it was 175. Okay. Okay. Now this is a weird set because this is like a totally different set of things than we were looking at before. How did we get so lost? I'm going to pull us back to where we last left off with scenarios. We had the last time we marked things, we were at 8, and these are the 8. We had 5, and then we brought in 3 new ones as we searched for a way to make sure that we thought through the New Scotland thing. So I'm wondering if we can live with these 8 and start winnowing down and not adding in, because my head is bouncing. And I think we felt that we needed to keep at least in the mix, so that parents have something to react to. And okay. So are there any of these that we'd be willing to drop? Well, where's our composite friend? This one is the very worst composite, but I think
That's the only one that has New Scotland and Myers.
Huh. Okay. And also dual stays here. Did I lose that? Oh, wait a minute.
So I know Dorian raised it, but I mean, just curious for the board and Lori, and like, should it just be dual has to stay at Hackett? Is it such a pain to move everything around and move the teachers and split them out and redo it that ends up trying to narrow it to 4?
I think you guys had this conversation, didn't you, at one of the committee meetings?
Yeah, but we were like, yeah, I guess, you know, if there's currently 2 teachers, you could always split them up, but we didn't really understand whether or not, like right now, I guess one teaches 6th and one teaches 8th, and like just programmatically, we didn't know if it was really doable.
I believe Lori said that it's really based on how you build the schedule. Any Spanish teacher could teach the advanced Spanish section. It's a class right now because it's 24 kids. So it shouldn't impact staffing programmatically because it's a section of Spanish that they have to teach to that group of students. But you know, there are constraints for scheduling.
We have a couple of comments that were added to the chat, and these are from Talia with regard to why do we need only 5 scenarios? Why not the 8 to 10 that can be narrowed after community involvement? And do we need to narrow it more today? Can we keep these and then revisit after forums and community feedback?
Talia with the brilliant stroke of genius idea that gets us a get out of jail free card. I appreciate that. As Superintendent, what do you think? I mean, it does mean that we would be talking Thursday night about more scenarios than we had thought, but we're going to then have the opportunity for community feedback. How many do you think you can effectively explain to community to give them an opportunity to weigh in?
I think that we can definitely explain them based on, I mean, because we're going to have a full presentation. I mean, it's going to be, here's the process. We'll have to, you know, cut it down a little bit, but definitely hit all the salient points about here's the process, here's where we are, and here are the benefits of each scenario. And then, you know, have the parents provide input.
You don't think 8 is too many? You think that'll work?
You know, I think that based on where we are with the analysis that we have done this evening, I think what I'm starting to see is we're gonna go either way high, and then if we go lower, then we may be eliminating some things that we really need to get input on. So I think if 8 is the number and this is what we have, then we will make it work.
Okay, so here are the 8. I will have, I mean, some
criteria on? Is the walking criteria on at all?
I don't think we have, I think right now the only criteria I have on are the ones I've marked. I would kind of like to recreate this to see if there's, you know, a way we can explain to the community how we came to these 8, because it was a little bit of an iterative process. But so let's see if we can do it. We've got them. I'm going to mark them all with X so that we don't lose them. Okay, these are our 8, except that X has to go there. All right, we have 8. And data, oh my goodness, what happened? Okay, data, clear filter. So one way to get to the 8 is to find all the ones that start with X. And that should bring me back to 8. And that's 8. Okay, let's see if we can find them again.
While doing that, I'll read another comment from Talia. It says that New Scotland families are expressing concerns about the distance between New Scotland neighborhood catchment and North Albany. That will be a barrier for family involvement and participation in after-school activity like sports when transportation doesn't work. And we'll hear that, you know, and be able to bring that back when we engage with the community as well.
So one of the things that I know we are always sensitive on the board is making sure that we try and hear balanced community feedback. So I really am looking forward to a really strong set of focus groups, Superintendent, because we need to hear from everybody, not just.
Absolutely. And I think we've been very consistent. I think we've been very consistent as we have stated that that's one of the things that we know we needed to do based on that first survey that we did get. And I think that we have been very vocal with how we're looking to get that input because it is a priority.
That sounds good. Let's see.
And that was also one of the concerns that came out from the committee. So I think not just from, I don't want that to be just an administrative decision. That was also very evident from the input from the actual committee members. So I want to make sure that that is reiterated.
So I'm currently at 16, not 8. It includes our 8. Wait a second. No, I lost one of our 8 too. Trying to track back to see how we got to this 8. I think it had to do with this. That's what it had to do with. Hang on a minute. It was one of these 2 criteria. Trying to reduce the long walkers. Nope.
I think it was long walkers economically disadvantaged, and it was under 1,100 for all.
Huh.
It wasn't all quantitative, was it? Because we wanted options. We wanted to make sure the various schools had location options. So like the Newscott packet wasn't based on a filter. It was based on wanting one that specifically did that, right?
Right. So it may just be that we can't get back to the like a quantitative approach. Okay, we're sticking. This says 7. Hang on a minute. Oh, I have a filter set. Hang on a minute. Clear. Eight. There's our 8. Okay. I think we have done a lot tonight, you guys. This was extremely difficult, and I appreciate everybody sticking with it and trying to do the very best job we can. I'm really looking forward to getting some community feedback because there are so many complications and nuances here that just there's things that the numbers don't tell us that the people have to tell us, and I look forward to hearing from them. I hope that everyone does their very best to try to give us comment about what's in the best interest of the whole district, because that's the decision that we have to make. So that's what we're going to have to be faced with. So next step will be a conversation with the board on Thursday. You guys are welcome to join us, non-board committee members, if you would like to be there and talk through what this was. You can also come in virtually if that makes your life easier and you would like, we'll be there in person, but you can come in virtually if you want. And then we'll wait to hear from the superintendent about the community feedback plan.
Someone will send us links if we want to join virtually.
Can you let us know, let Ron know, and he'll have somebody send you a link?
Sure. Is it
possible? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, put me on the list for a link.
Can we get this Excel sheet? I really want to take apart how some of this stuff was done.
You should have it in your email around 4 o'clock today.
I do have that one, but it doesn't give me the capability to do it.
You got the blind one. You want the one with names.
Yeah, I want to see how you did some of this stuff just for my own knowledge.
Yeah, I'm happy to run Excel lessons on the side. Yeah, and absolutely. I will send this version out to Ron and have him send it around to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's our absolute deadline? What's the board's deadline for this decision? I can't tell you how many questions, how often that is the question.
So we were looking at March. As you know, we've had to push it back based on our process so that we want to make sure that we are, you know, including and getting the feedback and following that process that we need to. So we're looking at March.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Anne, for getting a handle on all of this. It's impressive and amazing, and really is going to result in such better decision making. I can't imagine how many hours.
There were a few this week as we redid a couple things. Dr. Robin and I are like tight now because he and I spent a lot of time together virtually. And it's really been an interesting process because I know the normal board role is to not have this kind of hands-on work. I would not normally do this, but it was something that needed to be done and I had the skills to do it. So I appreciate your thanks, but you know, we all do what we have to do to try and help the district, right? Okay, I think we should officially adjourn, bring this baby to a close. We'll see you guys on Thursday.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.